All right, everybody. We are back with the second part of our shame series. And I really enjoyed Tony and my conversation from part one of shame. And one of the things that Tony said in our conversation that I just kept with me is such a subtle and profound truth is that shame is supposed to be uncomfortable.
Mhm. Oh, absolutely. It's supposed to be uncomfortable and it's supposed to be there too, right? I always remind my clients, I'm like, you know what? If you're not feeling shame, if you can't feel shame, that's when I get worried, right?
Yeah,
Because I mean, being able to feel shame is our first indication that we're not a psychopath, right? Which means, hey, we've got some access to our emotions. We can work well. This is good, right? But the second thing is it means that we care a little bit about staying in connection with people.
yes. Yeah, because I mean, too, it is like remorse,
Mhm.
shame, discomfort with our own fatal flaws. All of
Yeah.
that is a part of our healthy humanity. And it's
Yeah.
it's interesting too, when I was considering some of what we talked about, our primal reaction, the poop and run,
Mhm.
is the deer in the headlights, like when we are confronted with our own humanity and our own limited humanity, and it's like, oh, I suck at being alive. That triggers shame. What also is interesting is when we notice somebody else's flaws, their own limited humanity, and we're like, oh, you suck at being a human. So I poop and run when I touch my own shame, and I poop and run when I touch your shame.
Totally. Like one of the best examples of this is if you go to like children's music recitals. That's it right there already. And everybody's sitting in the audience and they're like, yeah, kiddo, you got this. And they go and they're playing and then they freeze. And everybody collectively takes a breath and goes, what are they going to do? And that's a moment where we're all joining in shame and going like, oh no. Right. And we're cheering this kiddo on. But shame is sticky that way. It's social. We participate in it, right?
Yes.
And the half the battle, the thing that I love working through with my clients on this is trying to figure out playing the game. Whose shame is it? Because we can have our own shame, and we normally do, but usually the shame that we feel isn't always all ours. Sometimes we're taking shame for somebody else.
Definitely, definitely. I'd or we are feeling shame because of previous relationship. It's so
Mm.
important too to notice that shame is a relational experience. It's
Yeah,
rooted in our desires for people, our longing for attachment.
yeah. And it's rooted in that. And shame is not reality. Shame is an interpretation of reality.
Yeah.
It's your nervous system going, oh, shoot, got to feel this now. Something's not right. Got to take responsibility for it. And sometimes that interpretation is correct. And sometimes that interpretation doesn't have enough information to be correct. So
Yeah.
we can feel shame as a biological response. And I just want to normalize that. Sometimes we feel shame for no reason at all. That makes logical sense in a relationship, but sometimes we just feel shame. And it's like, oh, hello, shame, my old friend. You suck. I don't want you here, but this is part of my nervous system just trying to keep me alert to what it's seeing in reality.
Yeah, and I appreciate when you say that because again, we have an emotional experience of shame. So something Tony and I were pondering and noticing last time is shame has a sense into our fear zone, and shame also has a sense into our anxiety zone. But
Mhm.
when fear and anxiety, just like shame, cause problems for us, it's when we become disconnected from our bodily experience,
Yeah.
that we're not listening to our subconscious, our neural or nervous system
Yeah.
cues. And so then all of a sudden it's 9 p.m. and whether I call it anxiety or shame or
Mhm.
fear, I'm in it. Why did I do that? Even if I'm not
Exactly.
tying it back to whatever it was that I didn't notice,
Mhm.
where I felt like I was letting myself down or being unlovable.
Yep. Right. So I want to kind of put my thumb on something here because this is kind
Perfect.
of germane to the way that I work. I really approach psychology from uh, body plus plus body approach. And just to people tuning in to listen, I would kind of want to put this out there. Mental health is about a lot more than what's happening up here, right? If it's just your thoughts, we're going to run into some walls. Because if we talk about your mind being part of your nervous system doesn't stop here. It goes into every part of your body, to each of your toes, to each of your fingers, and to each of your organs. And that's important because all of those are feedback, two-way streets for information for your brain, right? It's not textbook information. It's perceiving reality information.
Hmm.
And because of that, I got clients that come to me and say, "Hey, Tony, I know what I want to think. Why don't I think that way?" And I say, "Okay, well, let's get under that. Let's talk about what emotions are driving your thoughts and how is your body even, why would your body be giving you those emotions?"
Yeah. And our body is part of our context.
Yeah.
It's our environmental cues. It's profoundly important. And it's so interesting because what you're challenging us with, Tony, is
Mhm.
that shame is a good thing. Shame is a
Absolutely.
resource. Shame is a
Yes.
resource, just like all of our feelings are resources. Our experience of shame, the more we resource it, the more we can be in relationship with ourselves and with other people,
Absolutely.
which is so interesting because we feel shame just like we feel bad feelings.
Mhm.
Anger gets judged like cray cray. We feel something
Right.
that's like, oh no, this is bad. And we
Right.
try to disconnect. Anxiety's bad. Fear's bad. Disgust
Oh,
is bad.
right.
Yeah, all these things. And really, shame, just like these other experiences, is so vital.
You teed that up perfectly because that's exactly where I want to go today. That's kind of what I had in mind for what I want to build out. We're talking about relationship, connection, and we're talking about all these difficult emotions that come up. Shame being one of them. But there's a lot of literature that talks about shame being the master emotion that relates to all these other difficult emotions too. So I'm just going to highlight the fact I'm calling them difficult emotions, not negative emotions.
And I love
They're,
it. I love how you said that shame is sort of the master board
Mhm,
or the master piece
mhm.
connecting to these other feelings. I haven't heard that said before,
Oh, okay.
but it
Well, I
makes
mean,
sense.
yeah, let's play it out a little bit. So I'm calling them difficult emotions, not negative emotions, even though there is actual research literature that calls them negative. I'm choosing a different path there. And that's science. There's a lot of paths that go there. The reason I'm doing that is because these emotions come from us. They're part of our nervous system. They're our nervous system giving our conscious brain a little knock on the door that says, "Hey, pay attention to this." Right? That's not negative. If we shut that out, we lose part of our experience of life. We lose a part of ourselves. So these difficult emotions, I want to normalize and put out there and say, hey, if we can actually work with them, we get to have a fuller, broader life.
Mm.
So shame, the master emotion. Let's play with these. The four emotions that I typically label as hard emotions are anger, fear, disgust, and shame. We can talk about sadness too. Maybe that's my white hole. I just play with it. It's not something that I find hard, although many clients do. So let's talk about these ones though. You can have anger without shame. We'll call it primary anger. Somebody can do something really foolish and you get angry as a response to that to say, hey, stop that. You might not be aware that you're making yourself or me at risk. That's a legitimate place to be angry. And that's why our nervous system gives us anger. It's energy to confront, to keep us safe and in connection. It's emotions, right? You can have secondary anger though. And what I mean by that is you can have shame come up first. And that shame becomes so overwhelming internally that your body, your nervous system says, well, we can't deal with what's going on inside. Let's take care of what's going on outside. And somebody can come up and say something that in response, you feel a lot of shame about. And you're like, okay, they're causing me to feel shame. Well, oh, that's not good. I'm going to get angry at them. And before you even know you're feeling shame, anger is there to take its place and fight for you and try to shut down that other person so that you don't have to feel so much shame, right? So that's how shame can be underneath anger sometimes. And we can deal with that anger all we want, but if we don't talk about the shame, that anger is going to keep coming up. You can throw all your tricks in the book that you want at it, but if anger is not the actual root, if it's actually shame that's under there, then that's what we need to look at.
I love that. And I think sometimes I've called that justified anger. That maybe there's this like, or maybe what I notice is justified anger is just that there's an appropriate place. Good anger at injustice, good anger at people shaming and how it's impacted us. Because the real thing is I clean up my side of the street. At the end of the day, it's like me and my side of the street. I want to look at you and say, look at what you did. You shamed me, or you made me feel, you did. But that does nothing for me. What does something for me is exactly what you're talking about. What Satir would notice as feelings, and feelings about feelings, what emotionally focused folk notice as primary and secondary emotion, and how it's confusing. How often do we feel one feeling?
Oh gosh. Almost never.
Yeah.
Sometimes you get one of the front lines.
Yeah.
But if you take a close look, there's usually 2 or 3 or 4 that are underneath.
And I wonder how often do we feel only good feelings?
That can be trouble sometimes too.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's interesting to really, when we notice, like, again, confusion is such a valuable experience. And how often a confused experience or conflicting emotions happening at the same time is actually under this, mega board of shame.
Oh yeah. No, totally. Right. That's always worth working through. And the thing is, the way I explain to all my clients is emotions are energy for motion. They're very functional. Anger gives us energy to confront when we're not being safe, right? That's energy for the motion of saying, please stop. I want to build on that later too. Disgust is energy to get something out that shouldn't be in, whether it's physiological or psychological. It's that energy that allows you to turn your insides out so that you can keep your insides safe. Fear is energy to run. These are all functional gifts from our nervous system to respond to reality, right? So these are our first interpretation of reality, and they move us. The movies can be moving. What do they move us to? They move us to cry. They move us to action, right? Our emotions are feelings that we feel that move us. Shame, no less. Shame moves us towards saying, hey, I screwed up. I need to take accountability. Or it moves us away from people when we can't bring ourselves to take accountability. That's a lot all at once.
Well, that makes sense with attachment too. My attachment system is activated and I move into a relationship or I move out of relationship.
Yeah.
And neither one of those is the good choice. It's just an action. There's emotion involved because something occurred in our relationship and I feel, and if I'm feeling two things that are giving me two different action tendencies, that fits so much with this idea of confusion and shame.
Totally. And you can be moving 2 different ways for 2 different reasons. And that's part of how we try clarifying some of that confusion even. You might be
really cool. I love this right now. I'm loving it.
Totally. So you can come into a moment with somebody and you can be like, hey, I'm feeling fear. I'm feeling anger. Maybe your fear is about COVID and your anger is about them not clearing their sidewalk. But if you're coming to that moment and you're not thinking about the sidewalk, you might think your anger is also directly related to COVID. And there's other things that are lurking, right? You can talk about shame and anger and say, hey, are they there for the same reason? Are they there about the same incident? Because that's a moment in reality. Or am I feeling this physiological response that's moving me? Is it there for the same reason? did I come into my day sad and then somebody did something that made me angry and I'm not sad about them? Or maybe I am.
It's interesting because when I work with people with anxiety, and this is same for how I'd work with shame. Years ago, when I was in my master's and I was starting to just sort of sense into how do I formulate what I'm learning into practical application.
Mm,
And I was driving down that number one from Abbotsford to Langley to go to university, and I was late. And I'm not a late person. I like being early. And it just like, if you're not 10 minutes early, you're 5 minutes late. I learned that. And so I'm driving down the highway and I felt all these feelings, and I somehow had the wherewithal to
mm,
look at my hands and say, I'm white knuckling it. What's going on for me right now?
yeah,
And I played the tape, so I caught it in that moment, but I
yeah,
played the tape of what was happening, and I held space for my fear
yeah.
because I like to be in control. That's how I cope with fear and uncomfortable feelings, is I'm being 10 minutes early and holding that confusion, that shame,
Mhm,
like letting people down, being on the radar of what if I'm late for class.
yeah,
And so it's this thing of like when we catch the shame experience or some of those feelings that we don't want to acknowledge. And that goes hand in hand with shame. I don't want to acknowledge this feeling, shame, that we notice the discomfort in our body, all this F20 saying, and
yeah,
that's our cue to say, I need to play the tape of the day. What
yeah.
is the source? What is the source? What's the actual event? What's the story I'm telling about myself? And the simplest question that I've come up with is, what is the truth?
Mm,
The truth is I was messing around a bit that morning.
mm,
Maybe I was reading One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. I read that in college. I don't know. um, Hemingway. I don't know. I was messing around and it
yeah,
left late. And so when I could pinpoint the event, then I can start to say, okay, what do I do? What do I
yeah,
do with it? Hello, shame. How am I going to take care of you? Thank you for signaling me.
yeah. Exactly. It's thank you for signaling me.
Thank you for signaling me. You're my resource.
Yeah. Well, exactly. And this is, if I could put my finger on something that I see happen a lot, even in my own life, is we keep ourselves really busy and we can go barreling through our days. And then an emotion comes along and it knocks us off center. And because we're rolling from one thing to the next, we don't get that time to slow down and to check in and to listen and say, you know what, if I don't address the fact that I'm feeling shame right now, it's not necessarily going to go away. And that's going to color the rest of my interactions. But if I could pause, I can see it as a signal. Well, A, that means next time I'm tempted to start fooling around and read a book and run late, I'm going to remember that's why I was late last time.
Yes. And
Right?
how are my interactions that day? I mean, that's a lovely story. I'm like, wow, look at you. You caught it right then. That is the least likely case. That's not
Yeah.
what normally happens. Normally, I or us people, we catch ourselves at like 8 p.m. and uncaught shame, uncaught dishonored or denied emotion
Yeah.
does color all of our interactions in that day. So then not only am I
Yeah.
feeling like a piece of shit about being late, but
Right.
all the other crap I did during the day, all the times I poop and ruin.
Yeah. Right. And
Yeah.
then somebody comes up to you and they said, hey, you're late. And then you're still in the midst of your emotion. You're like, you idiot. What the heck? Stop pointing this out. Like, ugh, get out of my
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
And then because we haven't stopped and paused and caught the emotion, because we cut it off, we dishonored it, we've missed part of our experience, we leak our emotions everywhere. And then guess what happens? We end up feeling more shame. It's God, why did I want that person? Now they must have. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So, and what we call like in the attachment world circle of security, they talk about shark music or da
mm,
da. But when we're not noticing our discomfort and our central nervous system becomes dysregulated, our body gets all like whatever it's doing, even if we're still as can be.
yeah,
The real risk is, and we talk about this with parenting, but it's true for us. When I
yeah,
have unacknowledged emotion, and shame is going to be associated with that almost always.
Hmm.
I will present as mean, weak, or gone. I will shame it.
Yeah.
I will lame it. I will blame it. I
Yeah.
will shame it. I will lame it. I will blame my experience. Or because I don't want to be in my experience, I will shame, lame, blame you.
Yeah. Right. And this is the big piece. Our work being mental health is ultimately about helping people be in relationship better. Right. So all of this talk about shame, all this talk about emotion is okay. Our emotions are actually about keeping us in relationship. We get angry so that we can stay safe in relationship. We get disgusted so that things that aren't good for relationship don't enter the relationship. We can show fear that can be a signal to somebody that we're not feeling safe and that they have a role they can play in helping us stay safe. Shame is us noticing our own shame is us saying, whoa, I did something that wasn't good for the relationship. My shame is probably possibly triggered either by your anger or your disgust. So shame's an appropriate response that can bring us back into relationship, right? All of our emotions are just saying, hey, how do we be good people with each other? So I'll put this in front of you, right? If somebody did something that was really harmful to you and they never took accountability for it, it's it's very likely we'll feel shame whenever we think about them. We're carrying their shame. It's very likely that we're going to get angry at them and there's going to be a broken relationship ongoing. Have you ever had it happen where somebody comes up to you and they say, you know, Tara, I was a real idiot. I really did something that was very hurtful and I can see that I've caused you suffering. Right. And I own that fact. There's nothing I can do about that, but I need you to know that I recognize that I hurt you. Right. And essentially, I'm owning my shame about that.
Mm.
Right. And when you see somebody do something like that, when they connect with their shame and bring it back to you in a relationship like that, our nervous system says, oh, I guess I don't need to have revenge on them because they do get it. I don't need to make them feel the way I felt because they see how I felt. And because I believe they see how I felt, I might actually be able to trust them again. Right. This is how shame can be so important. Owning our shame can be so
It,
important in building trust with people.
it is so profound. And I can't hear that enough, to be truthful, that the more
Yeah.
we take ownership of our side of the street, it really what's key, because when we talk about owning someone else's shame, and it's just the design of attachment that
Yeah.
little babies start owning big people's emotions from the get-go in utero.
Yes.
So we could do a whole other series on that. There's tons. That's a lot. That's a big one.
We're not blank slates when we come in. We've already had 9 months of experiencing our nervous system.
Yes. Yes. And it's powerful that, like, I see you and
Hmm.
I see your humanity.
Hmm.
I accept my own humanity and I
Yeah.
did something wrong to you,
Yeah.
and although I'm calling it poop and running because I'm referring to our last conversation. It's, when we hit someone else with mean, weak, or gone,
Yeah.
when we use shame, we shame someone. When we use blame or guilt, when we guilt someone, or when we humiliate someone, we're really teaching them that we're not safe.
Yeah.
So when I see that, what I've done, and I can say, wow, that's terrible. I'm so sorry.
Hmm.
I own it. Like, this is what I did. That's not okay. I think that evokes curiosity, number one, and then it's the potential for that corrective experience.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Right. I mean, that's why I want to play shame, owning shame against revenge. Right.
Yeah,
Um,
that's
we can have,
exactly it. That's
we,
exactly it.
because we can have these elaborate systems of justice and people can still face justice without ever owning their shame. And at the end of the day, I think we really care a lot more about people seeing us and recognizing their pain than we do about seeing them have consequences. There can be a short-term little mirthfulness that says, they got what was coming to them. But we still feel missed.
Yeah.
Something fundamental in our experience goes unrecognized, and that never feels complete. Whereas if somebody owns their shame, hey, things in reality break that can't be replaced. Certain experiences can't be undone, right? So owning shame isn't making things right, but it's coming back into connection, or even offering just to see the other person.
I
It's
think
different than an economy. It's a relationship.
it's non-transactional. And
Exactly.
owning shame really is not about fixing it. When I own my shame, I'm not really fixing it for you. I'm just being human. And
Yeah.
I'm being more contented to say shame is a resource in my life.
Yeah.
And I'm accountable to myself. And so then I am accountable to you in relationship. And then I'm going to tell you in safe context, like we can't do this with everybody. And
No.
I mean, as I'm saying it, I'm like, I don't do this with everybody. I get it wrong with people,
No.
and I leave it alone. Like I'm a person like everybody else.
Yep. Yep. And some people are not safe. Some people will never own their shame, no matter how we invite them into doing so.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Or I mean, too, I think that there's relationships where we're getting it wrong. I'm getting it wrong on my side of the street. The other person's getting it wrong on their side of the street. And then there's times where for me, I just count my losses and like I own my shame on my own. Forgiveness is individual. You know, if we're lucky enough to have a safe relationship, Tony, if you hurt me or I hurt you, we have such safety that we get to share forgiveness. But
Yeah.
there are times I have relationships that I've been through where it's like, I don't think that I get a dyadic forgiveness experience. I get to work through my own shame and my own self-forgiveness and get my own lumps.
Yep.
You
Totally. No, absolutely. Right.
know?
Because at the end of the day, for you, for me, for anybody listening, it's really this idea is we don't get to say what other people do. This is
Mhm.
for us.
Owning shame is non-punitive.
Yeah.
Is part of it. Owning our shame is not about penalizing. It's not about, like you said, vengeance. It's not about like putting it on somebody else.
Yeah.
Our shame is our own to carry. And so that inner relationship, earn security here. How do I earn
Mhm.
security in me so that I have more shared security in my other relationships?
Yep. Yeah. Can I label something?
Love it.
We we can trust other people. We have a trust relationship with ourselves, right? This is a thing that happens often at betrayal. A lot of the clients I've been working with over the past few months have talked about instances of betrayal. And the thing that really sucks about betrayal, I say this every time, is it's twofold. It's a two-sided sword. It's how could you do that? And how didn't I? How didn't I see that? And even if you never see that person again after being betrayed, you walk away kind of going, how did I not see that coming? How can I trust myself in any other relationship? Right. So owning our shame is part of us learning how to trust ourselves and saying, you know what? I can take account for the times that I've screwed up. They're not a surprise to me. I'm not hiding them from myself. Right. I know where my limits and my weaknesses are. And I know how to protect myself and people around me from my own limits and weaknesses. But that's building trust with yourself, right? If we talk about relationships, a concept I was given through body dynamic is this idea of mutual connection,
Mhm.
right? And it's not just you and me in a relationship. It's can I be all of me as I know myself? Can you be all of you as you know yourself? So can we be in connection with ourselves? And can we be in connection with each other? Right. So
Beautiful.
there's a lot of different connection going on there, but owning our emotions, owning our crap is how we stay in connection with ourselves.
Totally. And grounded, that there's even
Yeah.
the somatic of like 2 feet on the floor actually means something.
Yes.
It's interesting with certain types of communicators that pop up into our heads. Like some people popcorn out all the time. Some people just pop up and get stuck here.
Yep.
And with the people who like to get stuck in their head, sometimes it'll make sense to them. I'll be like, we're going to work on you talking out of your belly button. Like,
Mm,
you're so good at talking up here. Let's like, what if you're talking through your belly button? Like, let's get through that slab of cement into your being, into your body, feel the feelings, and let your navel speak. So a
mm,
different view of relationship with self. I also, what I hear you saying, Tony, about making friends with our shame, I think that when we can notice shame and sit in it, and that's one of those new cliches that maybe we're saying too much, sit in it, sit in it. But
mm.
I like, it's like, okay, I feel ick all over. Oh,
Yeah.
it's down my ribs. It's like a ice in my stomach and an ache
Mm,
in my heart. Like I'm
mm,
full of the shame
mm,
in my head. And I gotta just like get slow and start feeling all these feelings.
mm, mm,
I really know it's shame actually. Like I'm
mm,
self-disclosing. I'm not just
mm.
being metaphorical. This is for me.
Yeah.
And those a false statement that we will say as psychology, and it's a lie. Well, it's kind of is it implies something shaming is you are the common denominator in all of your relationships.
Mm,
That's a shame statement. So many people have walked away and it's like every time I get curb stomped in relationships, it's because I'm the common denominator.
mm,
Period. Don't access my shame. The truth of being the common denominator is there's people who operate very different than me. There's people that operate very different than Tony and from everybody else. And sometimes when they're in a sticky spot in their own life, they're going to do things. And so if somebody strategizes, like how I strategize to hide my shame, my default mechanism looks different than people of a different attachment, a different
yep.
trauma history, a different life experience.
Yep.
And so somebody with a very different makeup, I will be surprised by them, just as somebody with a different makeup will be surprised by me. And we can injure each other and then remind us
Oh,
of
man.
other similar relationships that have had similar injuries.
Oh, yeah.
But that's not a fatal flaw of like, oh, I have like a huge bullseye on my back. They saw me coming. I'm weak. I'm a loser. Like, it's not loser.
Right.
It's different. It's a different relationship with shame, emotion, and humanity, my own humanity.
Yeah. How to pull two threads, a tied to bow with them for you here, because this is something that came up very recently in the session. It's marrying this idea of sitting with it and the lies. And shame, as it moves us, has a greater capacity to twist our sense of reality, to lie to us than most other emotions. At least in my experience. I might be wrong there, but it nevertheless has that capacity. So one of the challenges around shame is, can I stay with it long enough to see the other side? Or am I always going to run from it? Or am I always going to cover it with anger?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So this idea of sitting with it is, can I allow myself to be uncomfortable enough to dispel the twisted reality that shame presents to me? Right? This happens in relationships a lot. This is the challenge around vulnerability, right? This shame says you're not good enough. You're broken. You're dirty. You're twisted. You've been stomped on. Nobody's gonna like the real you. They only like the you that you show them.
Right.
This is a really gnarly shame narrative, right? And what this does in relationship is it prevents us from actually becoming vulnerable with our partners.
Mm-hmm.
And the lie is, if they saw the real you, they would leave. And this is how shame can run a relationship. So one of the challenges is saying, can I be with my shame long enough to see the other side? And here's the antidote to shame, because shame threatens broken relationship. So if you can be in your shame and stay in connection with yourself, and then if you can be in your shame with your partner and they see you in the full glory of all your shame, and they look at you and say, hey, I see you
Mhm.
and I'm not going anywhere. I'm here with you. That's inviting a deeper intimacy, because then they get to see more of who you are. And that little twisted lie of shame that says you're not good enough to stay in this relationship gets a whole other, it shrivels up and dies.
Yeah. Love and acceptance for the sake that you merely exist with flaws is by far more powerful than the lies of
Mhm.
shame.
Yep.
And that's good. And any emotion inside of us that
Mhm.
we have a disorganized relationship with, this is not a good feeling. And people do it with all of the feelings.
Yep.
People have problems with joy. So
Oh, yeah.
any feeling that I am rejecting, minimizing, ignoring, devaluing, when it shows up, almost always shame shows up.
Yeah.
Maybe always. I don't know. I mean, like, it's hard to be absolute, but it might always be there with emotions that we don't want to acknowledge or defects of character,
Yep.
relational woundedness. Our attachment system gets activated and we do
Yep.
something that we weren't polished and put together with whatever we like to do. So
Yep.
this is lovely, lovely, Tony, and
I just want to put a quick disclaimer out there.
perfect.
Just really quick. This is, I'm guessing you want to kind of tie the bow here, right? So the quick disclaimer is not everybody is safe enough to see you in the flaws of your shame, right? But at the very least, what we get to do is if we can sit with our own shame, we can be with ourselves in our own shame. That puts us in the best position to see our partner in the fullness of their shame. We get to be that person. We get to be that person for someone, maybe a few people, right? If we can hold our shame, we can help people through a lot more of their own process. Whether we're practitioners, whether we're partners, whether we're parents, or what other random kind of person we are in a person's life. Not everybody's safe, but we get to say whether or not we want to become safe.
Beautiful, beautiful. However, we notice that for ourselves. If it's this talk through your navel, if it's, put the oxygen mask on yourself before you put it on somebody else.
Yeah.
But it's this old like cliche, I change me, you change you. Like really the power to earn secure adult relationships, the power of attachment focused parenting, the power of relationship is I love and accept my own humanity and I listen for it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I can tune in to you. I can be attuned here so I can be attuned with others.
Yeah,
Power of shame, power of shame. I think we're going to do at least one more of these, hey?
I think so. Absolutely.
Yeah. We'll just keep rolling in the shame.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Thanks, Tony. I appreciate your brain and your passion for understanding emotion in our bodies. And like,
Mm-hmm.
it's so inspiring to have these conversations.
Mm-hmm. Totally. This has
Okay.
been so much fun.
Take care.